My sister sends me a letter. Dear Junior, I am still looking for a job. They keep telling me I don't have enough experience. But how can I get enough experience if they don't give me a chance to get experience? Oh well, I have a lot of free time. So I have started to write my life story. Really? Isn't that crazy? I think I'm going to call it How to Run Away from Your House and Find Your Home. What do you think? Tell everybody I love them and miss them. Love, you're a big sis. P.S. And we moved into a new house. It's the most gorgeous place in the world. Reindeer games. I almost didn't try out for the Reardon basketball team. I just figured I wasn't going to be good enough to make even the C squad. And I didn't want to get cut from the team. I didn't think I could live through that humiliation. But my dad changed my mind. Do you know about the first time I met your mother? He asked. You're both from the res, I said. So it was on the res, big duh. But I only moved to this res when I was 5 years old. So your mother is 8 years older than me. And there's a partridge in the pear tree. Get to the point, Dad. Your mother was 13, and I was 5 when we first met. And guess how we first met? How? She helped me get a drink from a water fountain. Well, that just seems sort of gross, I said. I was tiny, Dad said, and she boosted me up so I could get a drink. And imagine, all these years later, and we're married and have 2 kids. What does this have to do with basketball? You have to dream big to get big. That's pretty dang optimistic for you, Dad. Well, you know, your mother helped me get a drink from the water fountain last night, if you know what I mean. And all I could say to my father was, ooh. That's one more thing people don't know about Indians. We love to talk dirty. Anyway, I signed up for basketball. On the first day of practice, I stepped onto the court and felt short, skinny, and slow. All of the white boys were good. Some were great. I mean, there were some guys who were 6'6" and 6'7". Roger the Giant was strong and fast and could dunk. I tried to stay out of the way. I figured I'd die if he ran me over. But he just smiled all the time, played hard, and slapped me hard on the back. We all shot basketballs for a while, and then Coach stepped onto the court. 40 kids immediately stopped bouncing and shooting and talking. We were silent. Snap. Just like that. I want to thank you all for coming out today, Coach said. There are 40 of you, but we only have room for 12 on the varsity and 12 on the junior varsity. I knew I wouldn't make those teams. I was C squad material for sure. In other years, we've also had a 12-man C squad, Coach said, but we don't have the budget for it this year. That means I'm going to have to cut 16 players today. 20 boys puffed up their chests. They knew they were good enough to make either the varsity or the junior varsity. The other 20 shook their heads. We knew we were cuttable. I really hate to do this, Coach said. If it were up to me, I'd keep everybody. But it's not up to me. So we're just going to have to do our best here, okay? You play with dignity and respect, and I'll treat you with dignity and respect no matter what happens, okay? We all agreed to that. Okay, let's get started, Coach said. The first drill was a marathon. Well, not exactly a marathon. We had to run 100 laps around the gym. So 40 of us ran, and 36 of us finished. After 50 laps, one guy quit. And since quitting is contagious, 3 other boys caught the disease and walked off the court too. I didn't understand. Why would you try out for a basketball team if you didn't want to run? I didn't mind. After all, that meant only 12 more guys had to be cut. I only had to be better than 12 other guys. Well, we were good and tired after that run. And then Coach immediately had us playing full court one-on-one. That's right, full court one-on-one. That was torture. Coach didn't break it down by position, so quick guards had to guard power forwards and vice versa. Seniors had to guard freshmen and vice versa. All-stars had to guard losers like me and vice versa. Coach threw me the ball and said, go. So I turned and dribbled straight down the court. A mistake. Roger easily poked the ball away and raced down toward his basket. Ashamed, I was frozen. What are you waiting for? Coach asked me. Play some D. Awake, I ran after Roger, but he dunked it before I was even close. Go again, Coach said. This time, Roger tried to dribble down the court and I played defense. I crouched down low, spread my arms and legs high and wide, and gritted my teeth. And then Roger ran me over. Just sent me sprawling. He raced down and dunked it again while I lay still on the floor. Coach walked over and looked down at me. What's your name, kid? He asked. Arnold, I said. You're from the reservation? Yes. Did you play basketball up there? Yes. For the 8th grade team. Coach studied my face. I remember you, he said. You were a good shooter. Yeah, I said. Coach studied my face some more, as if he were searching for something. Roger is a big kid, he said. He's huge, I said. You want to take him on again? Or do you need a break? 90% of me wanted to take the break, but I knew if I took that break, I would never make the team. I'll take him on again, I said. Coach smiled. All right, Roger, he said. Line up again. I stood up again. Coach threw me the ball, and Roger came for me. He screamed and laughed like a crazy man. He was having a great time, and he was trying to intimidate me. He did intimidate me. I dribbled with my right hand toward Roger, knowing that he was going to try to steal the ball. If he stayed in front of me and reached for the ball with his left hand, then there was no way I could get past him. He was too big and strong, too immovable. But he reached for the ball with his right hand, and that put him a little off balance. So I spun dribbled around him, did a 360, and raced down the court. He was right behind me. I thought I could outrun him, but he caught up to me and just blasted me. Just me skidding across the floor again. The ball went bouncing into the stands. I should have stayed down, but I didn't. Instead, I jumped up, ran into the stands, grabbed the loose ball, and raced toward Roger standing beneath the basket. I didn't even dribble. I just ran like a fullback. Roger crouched, ready to tackle me like he was a middle linebacker. He screamed. I screamed. And then I stopped short about 15 feet from the hoop and made a pretty little jump shot. Everybody in the gym yelled and clapped and stomped their feet. Roger was mad at first, but then he smiled, grabbed the ball, and dribbled toward his hoop. He spun left, right, but I stayed with him. He bumped me, pushed me, and elbowed me, but I stayed with him. He went up for a layup, and I fouled him. But I'd learned there are no fouls called in full court one-on-one. So I grabbed the loose ball and raced for my end again. But Coach blew the whistle. All right, Arnold, Roger, Coach said. That's good. Next two. I took my place at the back of the line, and Roger stood next to me. Good job, he said, and offered his fist. I bumped his fist with mine. I was a warrior. And that's when I knew I was going to make the team. Heck, I ended up on the varsity as a freshman. Coach said I was the best shooter who'd ever played for him, and I was going to be his secret weapon. I was going to be his weapon of mass destruction. Coach sure loved those military metaphors. 2 weeks later, we traveled up the road for our first game of the season, and our first game was against Welpinit High School. Yep, it was like something out of Shakespeare. The morning of the game, I'd woken up in my res house so my dad could drive me the 22 miles to Reardon so I could get on the team bus for the ride back to the reservation. Crazy. Do I have to tell you that I was absolutely sick with fear? I vomited 4 times that day. When our bus pulled into the high school parking lot, we were greeted by some rabid elementary school kids. Some of those little dudes and dudettes were my cousins. They pelted our bus with snowballs, and some of those snowballs were filled with rocks. As we got off the bus and walked toward the gym, I could hear the crowd going crazy inside. They were chanting something. I couldn't make it out. And then I could. The res basketball fans were chanting, Arnold sucks, Arnold sucks, Arnold sucks. They weren't calling me by my res name, Junior. Nope. They were calling me by my Reardon name. I stopped. Coach looked back at me. Are you okay? He asked. No, I said. You don't have to play this one, he said. Yes, I do, I said. Still, I probably would have turned around if I hadn't seen my mom and dad and grandma waiting at the front door. I know they'd been pitched just as much crap as I was. And there they were, ready to catch more crap for me, ready to walk through the crap with me. 2 tribal cops were also there. I guess they were for security. For whose security? I don't know. But they walked with our team too. So we walked through the front and into the loud gym, which immediately went silent. Absolutely quiet. My fellow tribal members saw me, and they all stopped cheering, talking, and moving. I think they stopped breathing. And then, as one, they all turned their backs on me. It was a frickin' awesome display of contempt. I was impressed. So were my teammates. Especially Roger. He just looked at me and whistled. I was mad. If these dang Indians had been this organized when I went to school here, maybe I would have had more reasons to stay. That thought made me laugh. So I laughed. And my laughter was the only sound in the gym. And then I noticed that the only Indian who hadn't turned his back on me was Rowdy. He was standing on the other end of the court. He passed a basketball around his back, around his back, around his back, like a clock. And he glared at me. He wanted to play. He didn't want to turn his back on me. He wanted to kill me face to face. That made me laugh some more. And then coach started laughing with me, and so did my teammates. And we kept laughing as we walked into the locker room to get ready for the game. Once inside the locker room, I almost passed out. I slumped against the locker. I felt dizzy and weak. And then I cried and felt ashamed of my tears. But coach knew exactly what to say. "It's okay," coach said to me, but he was talking to the whole team. "If you care about something enough, it's going to make you cry. But you have to use it. Use your tears, use your pain, use your fear. Get mad, Arnold. Get mad." And so I got mad. And I was still mad and crying when we ran out for warm-ups. And I was still mad when the game started. I was on the bench. I didn't think I was going to play much. I was only a freshman. But halfway through the first quarter, with the score tied at 10, coach sent me in. And as I ran onto the court, somebody in the crowd threw a quarter at me and hit me in the frickin' forehead. They drew blood. I was bleeding, so I couldn't play. Bleeding and angry, I glared at the crowd. They taunted me as I walked into the locker room. I bled alone until Eugene, my dad's best friend, walked in. He had just become an EMT for the tribal clinic. "Let me look at that," he said, and poked at my wound. "You still got your motorcycle?" I asked. "Nah, I wrecked that thing," he said, and dabbed antiseptic on my cut. "How does this feel?" "It hurts." It's nothing," he said. "Maybe 3 stitches? I'll drive you to Spokane to get it fixed up." "Do you hate me too?" I asked Eugene. "Nah, man, you're cool," he said. "Good," I said. "It's too bad you didn't get to play," Eugene said. "Your dad says you're getting pretty good." "Not as good as you," I said. Eugene was a legend. People say he could have played in college, but people also say Eugene couldn't read. You can't read, you can't ball. "You'll get them next time," Eugene said. "You stitch me up," I said. "What?" "You stitch me up. I want to play tonight." "I can't do that, man. It's your face. I might leave a scar or something." "Then I'll look tougher," I said. "Come on, man." So Eugene did it. He gave me 3 stitches in my forehead, and it hurt like crazy, but I was ready to play the second half. We were down by 5 points. Rowdy had been an absolute terror, scoring 20 points, grabbing 10 rebounds, and stealing the ball 7 times. "That kid is good," coach said. "He's my best friend," I said. "Well, he used to be my best friend." "What is he now?" "I don't know." We scored the first 5 points of the third quarter, and then coach sent me into the game. I immediately stole a pass and drove for a layup. Rowdy was right behind me. I jumped into the air, heard the curses of 200 Spokanes, and then saw only a bright light as Rowdy smashed his elbow into my head and knocked me unconscious. Okay, I don't remember anything else from that night. So everything I tell you now is secondhand information. After Rowdy knocked me out, both of our teams got into a series of shoving matches and push fights. The tribal cops had to pull 20 or 30 adult Spokanes off the court before any of them assaulted a teenage white kid. Rowdy was given a technical foul, so we shot 2 free throws for that. I didn't shoot them, of course, because I was already in Eugene's ambulance with my mother and father on the way to Spokane. After we shot the technical free throws, the 2 referees huddled. They were 2 white dudes from Spokane who were absolutely terrified of the wild Indians in the crowd and were willing to do anything to make them happy. So they called technical fouls on 4 of our players for leaving the bench and on coach for unsportsmanlike conduct. Yep, 5 technicals, 10 free throws. After Rowdy hit the first 6 free throws, coach cursed and screamed and was thrown out of the game. Welpinit ended up winning by 30 points. I ended up with a minor concussion. Yep, 3 stitches and a bruised brain. My mother was just beside herself. She thought I'd been murdered. "I'm okay," I said, "just a little dizzy." "But you're hydrocephalus," she said. "Your brain is already damaged enough." "Gee, thanks, Mom," I said. Of course, I was worried that it further damaged my already damaged brain. The doctor said I was fine. Mostly fine. Later that night, coach talked his way past the nurses and into my room. My mother and father and grandma were asleep in their chairs, but I was awake. "Hey, kid," coach said, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake my family. "Hey, coach," I said. "Sorry about that game," he said. "It's not your fault. I shouldn't have played you. I should have canceled the whole game. It's my fault. I wanted to play. I wanted to win. It's just a game," he said. "It's not worth all this." But he was lying. He was just saying what he thought he was supposed to say. Of course it was not just a game. Every game is important. Every game is serious. Coach, I said, I would walk out of this hospital and walk all the way back to Welpinit to play them right now if I could. Coach smiled. Vince Lombardi used to say something I like. He said, "It's not whether you win or lose," I said. "It's how you play the game." No, but I like that one, Coach said. But Lombardi didn't mean it. Of course it's better to win. We laughed. No, I like this other one more, Coach said. The quality of a man's life is in direct proportion to his commitment to excellence, regardless of his chosen field of endeavor. That's a good one. It's perfect for you. I've never met anybody as committed as you. Thanks, Coach. You're welcome. Okay, kid. You take care of your head. I'm going to get out of here so you can sleep. Oh, I'm not supposed to sleep? They want to keep me awake to monitor my head. Make sure I don't have some hidden damage or something. Oh, okay, Coach said. Well, how about I stay and keep you company then? Wow, that would be great. So Coach and I sat awake all night. We told each other many stories, but I never repeat those stories. That night belongs to just me and my coach. And a partridge in a pear tree. When the holidays rolled around, we didn't have any money for presents, so Dad did what he always does when we don't have enough money. He took what little money we did have and ran away to get drunk. He left on Christmas Eve and came back on January 2nd. With an epic hangover, he just lay on his bed for hours. Hey, Dad, I said. Hey, kid, he said. I'm sorry about Christmas. It's okay, I said. But it wasn't okay. It was about as far from okay as you can get. If okay was the Earth, then I was standing on Jupiter. I don't know why I said it was okay. For some reason, I was protecting the feelings of the man who had broken my heart yet again. Geez, I just won the silver medal in the Children of Alcoholics Olympics. I got you something, he said. What? It's in my boot. I picked up one of his cowboy boots. No, the other one, he said. Inside, under that footpad thing. I picked up the other boot and dug inside. Man, that thing smelled like booze and fear and failure. I found a wrinkled and damp $5 bill. Merry Christmas, he said. Wow. Drunk for a week, my father must have really wanted to spend those last $5. Shoot, you can buy a bottle of the worst whiskey for $5. He could have spent that $5 and stayed drunk for another day or two. But he saved it for me. It was a beautiful and ugly thing. Thanks, Dad, I said. He was asleep. Merry Christmas, I said, and kissed him on the cheek. Red versus white. You probably think I've completely fallen in love with white people and that I don't see anything good in Indians. Well, that's false. I love my big sister. I think she's double crazy and random. Ever since she moved, she sent me all these great Montana postcards. Beautiful landscapes and beautiful Indians, buffalo, rivers, huge insects. Great postcards. She still can't find a job and she's still living in that crappy little trailer, but she's happy and working hard on her book. She made a New Year's resolution to finish her book by summertime. Her book is about hope, I guess. I think she wants me to share in her romance. I love her for that. And I love my mother and father and my grandma. Ever since I've been at Reardon and seen how great parents do their great parenting, I realized that my folks are pretty good. Sure, my dad has a drinking problem and my mom can be a little eccentric, but they make sacrifices for me. They worry about me. They talk to me. And best of all, they listen to me. I've learned that the worst thing a parent can do is ignore their children. And trust me, there are plenty of Reardon kids who get ignored by their parents. There are white parents, especially fathers, who never come to the school. They don't come for their kids' games, concerts, plays, or carnivals. I'm friends with some white kids, and I've never met their fathers. That's absolutely freaky. On the res, you know every kid's father, mother, grandparents, dog, cat, and shoe size. I mean, yeah, Indians are screwed up, but we're really close to each other. We know each other. Everybody knows everybody. But despite the fact that Reardon is a tiny town, people can still be strangers to each other. I've learned that white people, especially fathers, are good at hiding in plain sight. I mean, yeah, my dad would sometimes go on a drinking binge and be gone for a week, but those white dads can completely disappear without ever leaving the living room. They can just blend into their chairs. They become their chairs. So, okay, I'm not all goofy-eyed in love with white people, all right? Plenty of the old white guys still give me the stink eye just for being Indian. And a lot of them think I shouldn't be in the school at all. I'm realistic, okay? I've thought about these things. And maybe I haven't done enough thinking, but I've done enough to know that it's better to live in Reardon than in Welpinit. Maybe only slightly better. But from where I'm standing, slightly better is about the size of the Grand Canyon. And hey, do you want to know the very best thing about Reardon? It's Penelope, of course. And maybe Gordy. And do you want to know what the very best thing was about Welpinit? My grandmother. She was amazing. She was the most amazing person in the world. Do you want to know the very best thing about my grandmother? She was tolerant. And I know that's a hilarious thing to say about your grandmother. I mean, when people compliment their grandmothers, especially their Indian grandmothers, they usually say things like, my grandmother is so wise, and my grandmother is so kind, and my grandmother has seen everything. And yeah, my grandmother was smart and kind and had traveled to about 100 different Indian reservations, but that had nothing to do with her greatness. My grandmother's greatest gift was tolerance. Now, in the old days, Indians used to be forgiving of any kind of eccentricity. In fact, weird people were often celebrated. Epileptics were often shamans because people just assumed that God gave seizure visions to the lucky ones. Gay people were seen as magical too. I mean, like in many cultures, men were viewed as warriors and women were viewed as caregivers. But gay people, being both male and female, were seen as both warriors and caregivers. Gay people could do anything. They were like Swiss Army knives. My grandmother had no use for all the gay bashing and homophobia in the world, especially among other Indians. Geez, she said, who cares if a man wants to marry another man? All I want to know is who's going to pick up all the dirty socks. Of course, ever since white people showed up and brought along their Christianity and their fears of eccentricity, Indians have gradually lost all of their tolerance. Indians can be just as judgmental and hateful as any white person. But not my grandmother. She still hung on to that old-time Indian spirit, you know? She always approached each new person and each new experience the exact same way. Whenever we went to Spokane, my grandmother would talk to anybody, even the homeless people, even the homeless guys who were talking to invisible people. My grandmother would start talking to the invisible people too. Why would she do that? Well, she said, how can I be sure there aren't invisible people in the world? Scientists didn't believe in the mountain gorilla for hundreds of years. And now look. So if scientists can be wrong, then all of us can be wrong. I mean, what if all of those invisible people are scientists? Think about that one. So I thought about that one. And you can see what I thought in the PDF. After I decided to go to Reardon, I felt like an invisible mountain gorilla scientist. My grandmother was the only one who thought it was a 100% good idea. Think of all the new people you're going to meet, she said. That's the whole point of life, you know, to meet new people. I wish I could go with you. It's such an exciting idea. Of course, my grandmother had met thousands, tens of thousands of other Indians at powwows all over the country. Every powwow Indian knew her. Yep, my grandmother was powwow famous. Everybody loved her. She loved everybody. In fact, last week, she was walking back home from a mini powwow at the Spokane Tribal Community Center when she was struck and killed by a drunk driver. Yeah, you heard that right. She didn't die right away. The reservation paramedics kept her alive long enough to get to the hospital in Spokane, but she died during emergency surgery. Massive internal injuries. At the hospital, my mother wept and wailed. She'd lost her mother. When anybody, no matter how old they are, loses a parent, I think it hurts the same as if you were only 5 years old, you know? I think all of us are always 5 years old in the presence and absence of our parents. My father was all quiet and serious with the surgeon, a big and handsome white guy. Did she say anything before she died? He asked. Yes, the surgeon said. She said, forgive him. Forgive him? My father asked. I think she was referring to the drunk driver who killed her. Wow. My grandmother's last act on earth was a call for forgiveness, love, and tolerance. She wanted us to forgive Gerald, the dumbass Spokane Indian alcoholic who ran her over and killed her. I think my dad wanted to go find Gerald and beat him to death. I think my mother would have helped him. I think I would have helped him too. But my grandmother wanted us to forgive her murderer. Even dead, she was a better person than us. The tribal cops found Gerald hiding out at Benjamin Lake. They took him to jail. And after we got back from the hospital, my father went over to see Gerald to kill him or forgive him. I think the tribal cops might have looked the other way if my father had decided to strangle Gerald. But my father, respecting my grandmother's last wishes, left Gerald alone to the justice system, which ended up sending him to prison for 18 months. After he got out, Gerald moved to a reservation in California and nobody ever saw him again. But my family had to bury my grandmother. I mean, it's natural to bury your grandmother. Grandparents are supposed to die first, but they're supposed to die of old age. They're supposed to die of a heart attack or a stroke or of cancer or of Alzheimer's. They are not supposed to get run over and killed by a drunk driver. I mean, the thing is, plenty of Indians have died because they were drunk, and plenty of drunken Indians have killed other drunken Indians. But my grandmother had never drunk alcohol in her life. Not one drop. That's the rarest kind of Indian in the world. I know only like 5 Indians in our whole tribe who've never drunk alcohol. And my grandmother was one of them. Drinking would slow down my seeing and my hearing and my feeling, she used to say. Why would I want to be in the world if I couldn't touch the world with all of my senses intact? Well, my grandmother has left this world, and she's now roaming around the afterlife. Wake. We held grandmother's wake 3 days later. We knew that people would be coming in large numbers, but we were stunned because almost 2,000 Indians showed up that day to say goodbye, and nobody gave me any crap. I mean, I was still the kid who had betrayed the tribe, and that couldn't be forgiven. But I was also the kid who'd lost his grandmother, and everybody knew that losing my grandmother was horrible. So they all waved the white flag that day and let me grieve in peace. And after that, they stopped hassling me whenever they saw me on the res. I mean, I still lived on the res, right? And I had to go get the mail and get milk from the trading post and just hang out, right? So I was still a part of the res. People had either ignored me or called me names or pushed me, but they stopped after my grandmother died. I guess they realized that I was in enough pain already. Or maybe they realized they'd been cruel jerks. I wasn't suddenly popular, of course, but I wasn't a villain anymore. No matter what else happened between my tribe and me, I would always love them for giving me peace on the day of my grandmother's funeral. Even Rowdy just stood far away. He would always be my best friend, no matter how much he hated me. We had to move the coffin out of the Spokane Tribal Longhouse and set it on the 50-yard line of the football field. We were lucky the weather was good. Yep, about 2,000 Indians and a few white folks sat and stood on the football field as we all said goodbye to the greatest Spokane Indian in history. I knew that my grandmother would have loved that send-off. It was crazy and fun and sad. My sister wasn't able to come to the funeral. That was the worst part about it. She didn't have enough money to get back, I guess. That was sad. But she promised me she'd sing 100 mourning songs that day. We all have to find our own ways to say goodbye. Tons of people told stories about my grandmother, but there was one story that mattered most of all. About 10 hours into the wake, a white guy stood. He was a stranger. He looked vaguely familiar. I knew I'd seen him before, but I couldn't think of where. We all wondered exactly who he was, but nobody knew. That wasn't surprising. My grandmother had met thousands of people. The white guy was holding this big suitcase. He held that thing tight to his chest as he talked. "Hello," he said. "My name is Ted." And then I remembered who he was. He was a rich and famous billionaire white dude. He was famous for being filthy rich and really weird. My grandmother knew billionaire Ted. Wow. We all were excited to hear this guy's story. And so what did he have to say? "I'm not Indian, but I feel Indian in my bones." We all groaned. We'd expected this white guy to be original, but he was yet another white guy who showed up on the res because he loved Indian people so much. Do you know how many white strangers show up on Indian reservations every year and start telling Indians how much they love them? Thousands. It's sickening and boring. "Listen," Ted said. "I know you've heard that before. I know white people say that all the time, but I still need to say it. I love Indians. I love your songs, your dances, and your souls. And I love your art. I collect Indian art. Oh, God. He was a collector. Those guys made Indians feel like insects pinned to a display board. I looked around the football field. Yep, all of my cousins were squirming like beetles and butterflies with pins stuck in their hearts. I've collected Indian art for decades. Ted said, I have old spears, old arrowheads. I have old armor. I have blankets and paintings and sculptures and baskets and jewelry, blah, 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 blah. And I have old powwow dance outfits, he said. Now that made everybody sit up and pay attention. About 10 years ago, this Indian guy knocked on the door of my cabin in Montana. Cabin my butt. Ted lived in a 40-room log mansion just outside of Bozeman. Well, I didn't know this stranger, Ted said, but I always open my door to Indians. Oh, please. And this particular Indian stranger was holding a very beautiful powwow dance outfit, a woman's powwow dance outfit. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was all beaded blue and red and yellow with a Thunderbird design. It must have weighed 50 pounds. And I couldn't imagine the strength of the woman who could dance beneath that magical burden. Every woman in the world could dance that way. Well, this Indian stranger said he was in a desperate situation. His wife was dying of cancer, and he needed money to pay for her medicine. I knew he was lying. I knew he'd stolen the outfit. I could always smell a thief. Smell yourself, Ted. And I knew I should call the police on this thief. I knew I should take that outfit away and find the real owner. But it was so beautiful, so perfect, that I gave the Indian stranger $1,000 and sent him on his way. And I kept the outfit. Whoa, was Ted coming here to make a confession? And why had he chosen my grandmother's funeral for his confession? For years, I felt terrible. I'd look at that outfit hanging on the wall of my Montana cabin. Mansion, Ted, it's a mansion. Go ahead, you can say it. Mansion. And then I decided to do some research. I hired an anthropologist, an expert, and he quickly pointed out that the outfit was obviously of interior Salish origin. And after doing a little research, he discovered that the outfit was Spokane Indian, to be specific. And then, a few years ago, he visited your reservation undercover and learned that this stolen outfit once belonged to a woman named Grandmother Spirit. We all gasped. This was a huge shock. I wondered if we were all part of some crazy reality show called When Billionaires Pretend to Be Human. I looked around for the cameras. Well, ever since I learned who really owned this outfit, I've been torn. I always wanted to give it back, but I wanted to keep it too. I couldn't sleep some nights because I was so torn up by it. Yup, even billionaires have dark nights of the soul. And, well, I finally couldn't take it anymore. I packed up the outfit and headed for your reservation, here, to hand deliver the outfit back to Grandmother Spirit. And I get here, only to discover that she's passed on to the next world. It's just devastating. We were all completely silent. This was the weirdest thing any of us had ever witnessed. And we're Indians, so trust me, we've seen some really weird stuff. But I have the outfit here, Ted said. He opened up his suitcase and pulled out the outfit and held it up. It was 50 pounds, so he struggled with it. Anybody would have struggled with it. So, if any of Grandmother Spirit's children are here, I'd love to return her outfit to them. My mother stood and walked up to Ted. I'm Grandmother Spirit's only daughter, she said. My mother's voice had gotten all formal. Indians are good at that. We'll be talking and laughing and carrying on like normal, and then boom, we get all serious and sacred and start talking like some English royalty. Dearest daughter, Ted said, I hereby return your stolen goods. I hope you forgive me for returning it too late. Well, there's nothing to forgive, Ted, my mother said. Grandmother Spirit wasn't a powwow dancer. Ted's mouth dropped open. Excuse me? He said. My mother loved going to powwows, but she never danced. She never owned a dance outfit. This couldn't be hers. Ted didn't say anything. He couldn't say anything. In fact, looking at the beads and design, this doesn't look Spokane at all. I don't recognize the work. Does anybody here recognize the beadwork? No, everybody said. It looks more Sioux to me, my mother said. Maybe Uglala? Maybe, I'm not an expert. Your anthropologist wasn't much of an expert either. He got this way wrong. We all just sat there in silence as Ted mulled that over. Then he packed his outfit back into the suitcase, hurried over to his waiting car, and sped away. For about 2 minutes, we all sat quiet. Who knew what to say? And then my mother started laughing. And that set us all off. 2,000 Indians laughed at the same time. We kept laughing. It was the most glorious noise I'd ever heard. And I realized that sure, Indians were drunk and sad and displaced and crazy and mean, but dang, we knew how to laugh. When it comes to death, we know that laughter and tears are pretty much the same thing. And so laughing and crying, we said goodbye to my grandmother. And when we said goodbye to one grandmother, we said goodbye to all of them. Each funeral was a funeral for all of us. We lived and died together. All of us laughed when they lowered my grandmother into the ground, and all of us laughed when they covered her with dirt. And all of us laughed as we walked and drove and rode our way back to our lonely, lonely houses. Valentine Hart. A few days after I gave Penelope a homemade Valentine, and she said she forgot it was Valentine's Day.